An important influence in my life was my grandfather. He used to say things to me that really resonated in my life, and he would say things like, Cameron, the most important thing, the one thing that matters, is the life of your mind. I think I prayed once, God, I don't care about being beautiful, but please make me intelligent. And I think, that was my grandfather's influence. My grandfather and grandmother sang in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Every year they took me to the Messiah. And those oak benches at the tabernacle were so hard, and my feet wouldn't touch the floor. And I had to sit on this leg and then that leg, and it seemed interminable. And when they got to the Hallelujah chorus, and it sounded like the end, and then there was more. So it seemed like a never-ending thing. Well, we almost always go to hear the Messiah in the Christmas season, and it seems short now. It goes by in a flash, and it's all very familiar, and but these are the things that they did for me when I was young. And I remember a fourth grade teacher, Rhea Ferry Bailey, and she really encouraged me to be a visual artist, asked me to help her with all kinds of stage scenery and things like that. And I remembered this moment. We were taking a science test, and I was sitting there looking at this blank paper, and I was supposed to write a description of how a vacuum works. I'm not sure I could even do that today. And Mrs. Bailey came down the aisle and said to me, Cameron, draw me a picture. So I think maybe she meant draw a picture of a vacuum. But what I drew for her was a picture of a stag with 8 points standing on a bluff in the sunset. Below the bluff, there were tangles of grapevines with big purple grapes on them. Mind you, I'm 10 years old at this point, and probably influenced by Disney's Bambi. Probably I saw that 7 times, So, but the sort of encouraging thing is that Mrs. Bailey framed that picture of the stag and hung it in her classroom until she retired. Some years later, when I went back to see her, it was still there. My other great interest was science. I loved biological science particularly. I loved botany. And I thought, well, maybe I can make a living as a scientific illustrator. Fortunately, Chris came along and saved me from having to make a living as an artist. And we were married in 1962, right after we graduated. Of course, there was a lead up to that. In 1957, we were each chosen from our respective high schools for the American Field Service Student Exchange Program. He went to East High School, and I went to West High School. So never the twain will meet. But we did meet. We met in the passport office. 17 years old. It was in Salt Lake at that time. It was at the post office, and there was just a little room about as big as a kitchen where there were a couple of clerks and a counter, and Chris with his mother and me with my mother arrived at the passport counter at the same time. We were both going to be American Field Service students. So his mother said to him, Chris, isn't that the little Pedersen girl? And he, not wanting to admit that he knew who I was or that he had a mother or anything, said, I don't think so. And my mother said to me, Cameron, isn't that the snow boy? And I said, no. And then his mother said to him, go over and say hello. And so he did. He came over and said hello. And then after that, we met at AFS gatherings that were preparing us for our trips abroad to live with families. And he was given a family in East Bengal, one of the first AFS groups to go to East Pakistan. And I was assigned to a very nice family in Oslo, Norway. So we went, it was a summer program for 3 months, and we were on the same ship crossing the Atlantic, so seasick that there was no romance there. Then I went to Oslo and he went to Pakistan. When we came back, I had gained 15 pounds and he had lost about 40. We didn't recognize each other. We kind of just, you know, he went to college on the East Coast and I went to college on the West Coast. So one summer after our sophomore years, we both came back home to Salt Lake, and he called me up and he said, well, have you seen anybody this summer? I said, no, I haven't seen a soul. He said, well, would you like to go to the movies? And by the end of that summer, we became engaged. So, but then we still had 2 years of college to get through. Unfortunately, we were at opposite ends of the country, so we made it through. At Yale, he had studied international relations. And he was, I'm pretty sure it was his suggestion, but I was keen on the idea that we should travel, live for extended periods in different cultures, study languages, and try to know about other people. And I thought that was such a good idea. We were 22 at the time, you know, and I thought, let's do that for a while. Well, we did it for 36 years. I think India and Pakistan were really important and formative because those were our first posts. And we sort of found ourselves, in a sense, there. And we loved those countries. We loved being there. It was rich, interesting, really wonderful. All these drawings. So now we get to Belgium, where they had this beautiful Forêt de Soigne. And the forest grew right close to our house. So I used to just go there and watercolor. And so I have a lot of I had a lot of watercolors from Belgium, but they sold, so I only have a few. And here's Israel. I met a poet, and her poems struck me as really evocative of the landscape. So we decided to have a show together, her poems and my drawings of the landscape. So here are those paintings from Israel. They're actually pastel, but I call them paintings. I don't remember exactly how we found Bainbridge Island, but we did find it, and it just seemed perfect. So beautiful, a beautiful place to live, high level of education in the population, and wonderful people. So I had this question, well, can you really just move there? Can you really just decide you want to live there and move there? And it turned out you could. So we moved here, and we linked up with some other people who'd been in the Foreign Service, Harriet and Dan Alexander, and they introduced us to Sally and Merrill Robison. And one day, Merrill Robison said to me, Cameron, do you realize that if you go down to BITV and you plunk down $25 membership, you can become a television producer. And I said, well, you know what? That sounds pretty good. I went down, signed up, $25, and I met Kit Spear there. And Kit took me in hand and taught me, you know, how to be a producer. Eventually, I met John Williams at the television station, and he was doing underwater videography. So what a thrilling thing to think about. And I said, John, would you like to work together on a video? He said, I'd love that, Cameron. So we became partners in a number of things, but the first one was Return of the Plankton underwater Puget Sound. Then my second project was the Grand Forest. Connie Waddington was one of the leaders who got together and saved the Grand Forest from development. And Lee Cross, my sister-in-law, said, go get Connie's story. She has a wonderful story. So I sat with Connie, camera rolling, and Connie told me about how the people of Bainbridge Island saved the Grand Forest from development.
As we drive down Miller Road, the forest arches over the road, and we can catch glimpses of light on the moss and the ferns of the understory. This is our landscape.
But now I'm in the process of making the longest, most difficult film that I've made, and it's probably going to be one of my best. And it's called The Geological Formation of Bainbridge Island. I started reading the geology of the region, trying to understand what I'm dealing with here. And I realized what a wonderful, interesting story this is. And then I saw that Gregory Guillen, geologist, was going to give a talk at Strawberry Hill on earthquake preparedness. So I contacted him and I said, Greg, would you like to make, this is on the phone, I'm a stranger, but I think the Foreign Service gave me this confidence to just approach people and say hello. I said, Greg, hello, would you like to make a movie together? And he said yes. So we started this project in 2010, and it looks like it could go on forever.
It's a plot of the record of sound waves that have gone down into the earth and then bounced back up.
Honestly, when we started that project, I thought it would be about the glacial age, which is only 2 million years old. But Greg said to me, no, this story goes back 30 million years. We have dated rocks 30 million years old. Let's start there. And so, okay. There is the science side that I love. I'm so interested in how things work in nature. But there is the art side as well. And I was so thrilled to think that this island was going to have its own art museum. It just knocked me over. And I knew that I wanted to be a part of that and make films for the museum if I could. And the museum has been so welcoming and given me space to work with artists who are always so interesting, so thoughtful to talk to. And some of the really delightful times I've had with Jenny Anderson or Richard Jesse Watson or, Margie McDonald. These artists are wonderful as subjects, and So we have a nice little collection for the archive at the museum, and this has been a most satisfying part of my video production.